guys, today we got Nissan 370Z. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing lowering springs, both the rear set, both the front set. We're going to start by lifting it up. We're going to pull the wheels off. I'll give you guys an up close look at the springs that are installed in it right now. And then we're going to be installing the lowering springs. And this thing is going to sit low. Scratch-proof sockets are a must, especially on these Nissan wheels. It does not take much to scratch them. These got a nice Teflon coating on them, not going to tear them up. Alright, I want to make a point at something. It is very tricky to get this crossbar off. Now, I've taken these apart in the past, so I kind of know they got clips and you just got to move really slowly and work them up. But you don't have to remove the crossbar assembly. Okay, the reason that I remove the crossbar assembly is because, one, I like fixing stuff my way. Two, when you open up all this space, it makes it a lot easier to access the strut bolts. Now, I'm a huge advocate of being able to see what you're doing. So with the bar in the way, yeah, you can still see through it, you can still get to the bolts, you can still remove the struts. But when you're sending the struts up, oftentimes it is handy to be able to see exactly where the studs are, how to shift it, even reach your arm down through here. Now that would be very difficult with the crossbar installed, but you don't have to remove the crossbar. That being said, I now have a lot more access to do this job the right way, okay? So, if you are going to pull that up, you need to know that these are clipped in with each other, okay, and there's a tab here. This tab we're going to glue back, so basically it's just for centering. It's not actually a support tab, but you got a tab here, tab here, tab here, two on the back, or actually three on the back, excuse me, another alignment tab, another tab, and then obviously it has two of the push locks on the front of it. This is where that rubber the rubber weather seal, excuse me, clips right into the top of this. So, as I stated before, the bolts are out of the mount. So this essentially, you can kind of see, is free, okay? Now what we're dealing with is we still have the sway bar link that is actually the through bolt assembly as well. If you guys can see that. So the thing with that is you want to work them both out at the same time. A lot of guys fight these, but really what it comes down to is the sway bar doesn't want to move on one side and not on the other. That's the whole purpose of a sway bar, is to keep the front end or rear end, whatever axle it's installed on, rigid while cornering. So I'm going to set the camera down. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull these both forward, and we'll pull the struts out of it. Alright, so I have the strut bar pulled forward about 3 inches, and then what we're going to do, we're going to take the strut and we're going to walk the strut the opposite way of the sway bar link. And you guys can watch as I do this. The strut is going to come right out. Now as you're letting it down, here's the thing to keep in mind. You got a brake hose that you need to be very careful with. And don't swing the strut around, you'll hit the body of the car. Okay, so sits in there like that. This is the front mount of the sway bar. That's what I was saying, you go this way, you pop it off, pull it down, but you gotta watch out for this brake hose back here because there's no way to take it off unless you remove the brake lines. That is one way you could do it. Little overkill in my opinion, doesn't need to happen, but here's the first strut. I'm gonna go pull the other side. We're gonna bring you over to the strut compressor. We're gonna swap some springs. Sound good, guys? Alright, by no means are they sponsoring this video at all, nor do I really know anything about Swift springs. But this is the kit we got. Alright, so they even say fronts. That's kind of cool. Alright. What do we got over here? Okay, so we got the big ones are obviously for the rear. Smaller ones for the front. Now, do they have a right and left? They do not. So, fitment should be relatively the same. And get nice up and close there. Here's the factory strut right here. Okay. Over time, these rubber bushing covers get deteriorated and they start to move. They actually start to move on the strut. Okay. The proper way to install this is this piece right here, the very front of the rubberized portion should be starting right around this little detent in the actual coil spring. See where it gets a little bit lower right there? That should sit right there. It does not need to sit against the very front corner, because when you put the weight down on the car, the heaviest point of contact is from here all the way around to the other one right here. Now that's why there's little slots there, okay? It shows you the spring seat. Okay, just wanted to show you guys that. Now here's another important thing, okay? See where this indent is? In case you didn't already catch that, that is where the start of the spring goes. If you don't seat it exactly on that spot, you're going to have issues with the mount trying to spin, or the spring may even try to spin. Not only that, these have to be lined up correctly. So, simple as that. You line the 3 holes up on the top of the strut tower, put a little bit of grease on this gasket, some synthetic grease, not petroleum based. You need to make sure you go through, take the strut and send it up through the brake line, okay? Because it's got a mount right here. You cannot have brake line relocated in an area where it doesn't belong. That's a safety hazard, not okay. So, strut is in right now. I got it hanging on the bottom of the mount. You can't see it's behind the rotor. It's basically about 1/4 inch on the way. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna pull down on this and we're gonna push the bottom of the sway bar link, which is essentially the bolt for it, through there. Alright, I got you guys set up underneath here, right in front of the tie rod where you can see the bolt's gonna come through. So what we're going to do is we're going to push up slightly. We're going to twist this because, like I said, oftentimes the mounts get twisted. And in a case like this, you might have to get a mallet and start tapping it on because of the angle that the bolt's at. So obviously pulling up or down doesn't change the pressure that we have on this mount here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap this on with the mallet. We're going to put the nut back on. Don't forget there is the metal bracket that goes on as well. Remember this metal bracket? That has to go back on as well. Okay, it sits, I'll get my hand out of the way. It sits just like that. Okay, once you get the bottom bolted in, we're going to go up to the top and we're going to tighten those. And I'm going to show you guys too, and I'm going to say this right now. Start torquing strut tower bolts, okay? Okay, one more thing guys, I want to show you this. So I put the bracket on, I threaded the nut, just started it right here, okay? Don't tighten that first, because you're going to end up fighting yourself, alright? What you want to do is you actually want to put these 3 bolts in first, make sure this bracket is nice and centered, because if you just tighten that big nut down first, it's going to staple into wherever it was, and then you're going to have a hell of a time getting these bolts started. Now there is meant to be tension on this bracket, so like what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to get a pry bar, stick it in between here, pull it back towards me, and then we'll get those nuts in. You don't need anything crazy, small little guy like this. So I'm going to pull these back. Now I'm going to leave this pry bar in here, and as I'm tightening it down, I'm going to pull it straight so that there's not excess tension on one side of the bracket, if you guys can see that. Okay? Set yourself up a little swivel. So I got a little swivel socket here, and what I'm going to do is slowly okay, now we'll go to the top one. Okay, now that I'm closer, my swivel will actually bite on them. Okay, right before I tighten them, I'm going to pull this bracket up. Okay. Okay. Yep, sometimes the sockets get stuck, not a big deal. We're also going to take this one. We're going to bring this one in as well. Now this one's already lined up because we moved these over. So, okay, you want the stuff tight too. Now it doesn't, don't try to hit, you know, a million ugga-duggas on the torque wrench. Just make sure they're tight. And when I say tight, I mean impact gun tight, not hand tight. Okay. Now we're going to get our 19 and staple the big bolt down. Okay. Push forward on the sway bar link, it'll hold. Okay. And there we are. Bottom is installed. Sway bar link nice and tight, bolts tight, brackets tight. We're still up in the, we're still in the strut tower, we're still lined up there, so we're all good. I'm gonna switch around to the other side. Don't forget about, bear with me here. Don't forget about the hardware, okay? There's a nut that needs to hold this brake line. And there is also an ABS wires that need to be attached. Okay? They need to be attached to the mounts on the strut. Okay? Don't forget about that stuff, guys. I'd say she looks pretty good, guys. Now, I'm curious whether or not he's gonna need to remove the spacers. The only reason I say that is currently the tires sit pretty close to flush. The wheel actually itself sticks out slightly from the fender, which I'll be honest, I love that look. But once we set these down, we're gonna see if the spacers are gonna be an issue or not, because a lot of you guys do it, but we can't have rubber riding right into the corner of the fender. I've seen tires get split. I've seen a bunch of nasty things that come along with it, but I do like stamps, so I'm not gonna complain. Real quick though, you guys, just check that ass out. I mean, that is a nice ass. Alright guys, I'm going to show you how to set it up for the rear here. We got to remove the coil. Now the coil just sits up against this rubber damper here. It sits right on the actual body. There's no bolts or any kind of retaining hardware that holds it up in here. The only thing that really holds it together is sitting in the control arm bucket, which I'll kind of show you a picture. There's a rubber isolator in there. You got to make sure that stays in. Now as far as setup goes, what I have is a jack stand under it that can wind down. See how I have some distance there on the threads? Now what I'm going to do is we're going to remove this bolt, which holds that control arm to the knuckle. We're going to drop that bolt, we're going to swing the control arm downward, and as we do that we need to control the spring's backlash, hence why we have the jack stand under it. So I'm going to slowly release that jack stand, the spring's going to pop out, and then at that point we're going to be able to pop the lowering spring in. Same process for the other side. Fairly simple to do on the back here. Very simple. 17, 17. You're going to hold the nut on the back side. You're going to use your impact gun on the back side. You're going to pull the bolt out. Once that bolt's out, the control arm can drop straight down. Again, get something under it to control its release. Alright, we're going to start bringing it down. Alright, I swapped the rubber bushing on the bottom, so that's already in. We're going to go back up. Biggest thing when you're going back up, make sure you keep these aligned right here. Going to keep coming up with it. Perfect. Now you should own one of these. Now we need to shorten this distance, so I'm going to take my hand and push forward. Take our bolt, goes back in this way. So I'm going to have to finesse this some more in order to get the bolt in, but you guys get the general idea of swapping the rear coil springs at this point. Alright guys, lowering springs are in. We're going to see how she looks. There's 1, 2, said it in previous videos, say it again. Move slower, don't damage people's wheels. And no, I'm not going to ream them on with my Milwaukee M18 impact gun. I'm going to snug them with this. I'm going to manually torque them with a torque stick. No damage to the wheel. That's how you should be doing it as well. Oh yeah. Alright, we're on the final torque before I show you guys how low this thing is set. Alright, you guys ready to see it? Alright. Well, I think you guys can see what's going on. Stuck on the lift. I had a feeling that would happen. So we're going to go back up. I'm going to put some boards down. We're going to set them back down on the boards. I'll move the lift out of the way, and we'll bring it outside and we'll show you. Definitely like it.